Portfolio Composer, episode 153.
You're listening to the Portfolio Composer podcast with your host and coach Garrett Hope, where he teaches you what it takes to master the business end of writing music through mindset, marketing, and business skills. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter at theportfoliocomposer.com for exclusive offers, business insights, and information not shared on the podcast. And now, for this episode of the Portfolio Composer.
I just like to help creative people stay creative. I like to do the things behind the scenes that help them stay in a creative space and take that load off.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Portfolio Composer. I am your host, your coach, and your teacher, Garrett Hope. And I'm so grateful that you're spending your time with us today. And if you are listening, then you are already making the choices to move your career forward. Not that this is the panacea, but you are intentionally approaching your craft as a composer as a business owner and trying to solve the problems of how do you get commissions? How do you manage money? How do you move your career forward to where you want it to be? And I'm really excited today because today's guest has been, in my mind, this kind of mythic character, this unicorn, as she said it herself just a minute ago to me. Because as I was speaking to composers and members of our community, they would say, well, you know, Stephen Bryant and Jonathan Newman and Eric Whitaker and many others, they use Sarah as their assistant. And I would say, who is Sarah? Well, I finally found out who Sarah is, and she's amazing, and I'm so excited to introduce you to her. So welcome to the Portfolio Composer, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Sarah Meals, just so she has a last name, she's not just disembodied Sarah, is an arts marketer, activist, and enthusiast who in 2015 left her day job in arts administration to launch Goddess of Win Music Business Solutions. Goddess of Win provides music business support to freelance composers, everything from fulfilling out pesky vendor paperwork to fulfilling sales and rental orders to customers. And this is, Sarah, I think I've shared this with you, but I get asked by so many listeners of the podcast and friends of mine, why should I outsource? How do I know when to do it? Should I hire an assistant? What is this going to cost? How many hours a week do I give them? And so this is why I'm so excited to speak with you, because I think we can provide some guidance and some suggestions on this part of the composer life. Why don't we start by you kind of giving your origin story? How did you come to do this?
Man, that's kind of tricky. I guess, well, it really started with Steve Bryant. And actually, kind of before Steve was Eric Whitaker. So I met the famous, well, now infamous BCM International, Steve Bryant, Jonathan Newman, Jim Bonney, and Eric Whitaker many years ago at Midwest Clinic. I want to say, I think that was 2005. I helped them work their Midwest booth when they still had it. And we all became friends, and it was really enjoyable to me. I kept in touch with them. Fast forward many years down the road to 2011. I got the most random call from Steve Bryant saying, hey, I wanted to talk to you about possibly some work you could do with me. I've gotten to a point where I can't really handle all of the requests coming in, and I'm just completely overwhelmed. So I talked to Eric, and Eric said, hey, what about Sarah? And so that's kind of how we got started. It was literally a side job. He paid me a stipend. So I was making a little bit extra money on top of my job. At the time, I was working for Houston Ballet in their marketing department. And I was not bored at Houston Ballet, but looking for a little something else. And this was kind of my something else on the side that was fun to me. And Steve is a dear friend, and I was more than happy to help. So that's really how it started. I worked with Steve for several years before I even picked up another client. Jonathan Newman kind of came to me the same way a few years later and said, hey, I've got other things going on and I can't really be tied to my email. I just want to make sure someone is there to answer my email and make sure that they're getting the music. I think for both of them, they had gotten to a point where all of the paperwork and all of the, really boring part that comes along with being a self-employed business owner, it had gotten in the way of them distributing their music, and they were really worried, that they were going to drop a big performance or drop a good connection because they were so busy filling out a W-9. And that's really, who wants that? Nobody wants that. So I picked up Jonathan, and it was still like, yep, this is still on the side. I was kind of, working my day job. When I started working with Jonathan, I was actually living in Seattle, working at a theater company doing PR. So then I had Steve and Jonathan. So I'd work at the theater during the day, come home in the evening, and work for Steve and Jonathan. So I was kind of doing two jobs at once. But my husband was doing his doctorate. So it was just like, we may as well both be working all the time. I never saw my husband, so he never saw me. So, may as well kill two birds with one stone.
Right.
So that's how I got the two of them. And then I guess the biggest transition for my company was when I decided to, really go full in. I moved to Atlanta. I was having a hard time finding a job. And then I found out I was pregnant. So, that was a game changer. You really, when you get to that point as a woman, you start thinking, well, I want to be a good employee. So let's think this out. If I started a new job now, 6 months from now, I would be going on maternity leave. And then I'm not really sure whether I would want to stay at work or if I would want to stay at home. And so I was having a lot of, thoughts about just my career and what I wanted to do and how to balance it all. And that's something that, I could really get on my soapbox about. Women just have a very different relationship with work.
Oh, it's a whole different economics. It's a different thing.
You have other things to think about, that men don't have to think about. So anyways, I was having all of those thoughts. I emailed Steve and I said, Steve, do you think that this could be turned into a full-time thing? And he said, oh my gosh, I think first of all, if anybody could do it, it would be you. And second of all, you will have so many people approaching you that you probably wouldn't be able to handle it all.
He is proven right.
And he has been proven right. I picked up a few more clients. I randomly picked up a little bit of business with Eric, which, let me just be very clear, I am a very, very small cog in a very large machine with Eric. He has just a tiny handful of pieces that he rents, and I do his rentals. I picked up more clients. I was suddenly making it all work and kind of cobbling a business together while I was pregnant. And then I had my baby, Finley, and I've been doing both. I've been keeping a baby and running a business, which has been a very challenging year. But somehow I've been able to do it all.
Well, Sarah, as this is the day after Mother's Day, I first want to applaud you. I admire all the moms I know because I literally could not do what you do. I cannot do what my wife does and hold it all together. So I applaud you.
Thank you.
Yeah. But it seems to me like if I'm going to put this in kind of the music business speak,
Yep.
you, through a series of kind of fortuitous events, found a need in the community and then met the need. And that is the definition of entrepreneurship. And then when your life changed, you had many options and you chose to kind of jump in the deep end, and you've been rewarded.
Yeah. And I have to say, I probably felt the same kind of thing that any composer who has kind of a stable income and is considering just going to full-time composing, probably the same amount of anxiety, sleepless nights. Am I absolutely insane for doing this? I probably had very similar thoughts to composers who are jumping out into the abyss and wondering if they can make a life out of it. And so I was very lucky in that I had a partner who is also making an income, and that helps. Doing it on your own is very scary, I'm sure. Thankfully, my husband has been great and was very supportive and said, "Yeah, I mean, if you think you can make it work, then do it." So yeah, it's you really just have to see opportunity and go with it. One of the things that that really resonates with me and I keep in mind is I am more scared by opportunity than I am of anything else. Oh, so if I'm particularly fearful, then it usually means that it's the right move to make. Because it means that it's going to be hard. It's going to be scary. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be worthwhile. Usually it means it's going to be worthwhile. So you almost have to, I guess, to use a really popular phrase, lean into the fear.
Right, yeah. Who is that? That's one of the Facebook
Sheryl
woman.
Steinbeck.
Yeah. Well, it is really scary, but once you cross the threshold of work coming in and activity, you have more freedom and the potential for greater income than ever before. Yeah,
you do. And it really, I can't put a dollar amount on being able to see my kid every single day and having the ultimate flexible schedule, and also having, great clients who I really enjoy working with, and somehow I have been able to do it all. I mean, when women are thinking about their careers, a lot of people tell you can't have it all. But for me, it was more about, well, let's find some balance where I can have a job that I really enjoy and also see my kid a lot and see her grow up, and also be the wife that I want to be the community member that I want to be. It's a lot. I mean, it's a lot to think about, but you just do the best you can and find whatever balance is right for you.
Yeah, very true.
Certainly my path is not, meant for everyone. But it's what works for me and what works for my family. And so far it's gone really well. I'm very grateful for supportive clients who also want to see me be successful. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you provide the services you do and the help that you get, I mean, they probably are so deeply grateful for you that they want you to succeed.
Yes.
Just in the same way that you want to see members of your family succeed.
Yes. And I think it is mutual. I mean, that's the upside of having known a lot of my clients for a long time now, is that they are like family to me. Even my newer clients, I want them to be successful. I root for them. I know how difficult it can be to be successful as an artist. And anything that I can do to make their job easier and help them be more creative. I think that's, if there's been one strand in kind of my crazy day jobs with side jobs, the kind of unifying strand has been, I just like to help creative people stay creative. I like to do the things behind the scenes that help them stay in a creative space, and take that load off.
Well, that's a great transition. As I said just a few minutes ago, I get asked so often, why should I do this? How do I know when the time is right? And I said to you in a conversation many weeks ago, it feels sometimes like the eternal question of the chicken versus the egg. Do you need to reach a point where you can no longer scale or move forward, or do you invest and then get the return later? So what are your thoughts on that?
There's really no easy answer to that because it could go either way. In my experience, most of my clients have come to me because of the former of, I literally cannot invoice people fast enough. I can't track whether I'm getting paid. They've reached a point where they are doing, it's a great problem to have. They're doing so much business that they can't keep up with it.
Right.
That's the dream, right? Is to get to that point. So most of the time I would say that is the impetus to hire someone. On the flip side, you could argue that the latter is also true of, well, maybe this is an investment that you need to make to be able to take on that extra commission for a year. If you're in demand enough with commissions, and the thing that's holding you back from taking on too many commissions is that you can't run everything else, then that's a personal question you have to ask yourself of, why did I get into doing this in the first place? It's to write music. It's not to fill out W-9s.
Right. or God forbid, fill out ASCAP performance forms.
Exactly. It's not to collect a program to send into ASCAP or BMI. That's not why you decided to make a lifestyle out of this. So really, it's a very personal question. And of course, it depends on how much business you're doing, whether that's financially possible for you. I also talked to a composer, and I won't mention who it was, but talked to a composer a couple of years ago at Midwest who said, oh, I would love to take you on for just this one little project that I hate doing, but everything else with my business, I actually really enjoy doing it. I really enjoy tracking down programs because it keeps me connected to the people who are performing my work. And so for every person, it's very different. Some composers have the knack for business and really enjoy doing it, and that's great. Other composers, when they're asked to come speak in front of an audience before somebody plays their music, that produces hives for them. That's they don't like the public part of it. They don't like the business aspect of it. They just want to sit in their studio and write. So for every person, it's different. I can't tell you when is the right time. But I would say if you're passing up a commission because you don't think you can handle it all, or if you're late on delivering materials and you miss performances of your music because you couldn't get them the music in time for them to perform it, that's, maybe a telling sign. If that's happening frequently, then something probably needs to change.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what kinds of things an assistant can do.
Sure.
And I want to be clear here, and you've hinted at this, but you don't have to hire an assistant for all these things. You work out an individual relationship, but I just want to paint a picture of all the myriad of ways an assistant can help you lighten the load.
Yes. There are so many things involved with a composer's job that I had no idea about until I started working with Steve. there's all of these little tracks of revenue that you have coming in, and in order to keep it all straight, I mean, sometimes it does mean that you need an assistant. You've got just the sheer music sales and rentals, making money off of your actual music, selling it. Then you've got royalties. So my clients are kind of always bombarded with sync licenses, mechanical licenses, marching licenses, permission to arrange licenses. There's all of these licensing things that you can be making money off of. And it involves a lot of paperwork because, generally you want a legally binding contract with all of these people. So there's that part of revenue. Then there's the performance licensing like ASCAP and BMI, who you're being paid whenever your music is being performed in music venues. But it falls on the artist to provide proof that those performances took place. So that means every group that performs your stuff, you need to track down that program and turn it into ASCAP and BMI. That's a big one. I mean, that requires a lot of time, and a lot of time that composers really just don't have. Let's see, what else is there? Residencies. A lot of time goes into that as well. It's a lot of back and forth emailing, deciding on, whether how much budget the school can afford, how much money the composer is willing to do the residency for. So that's a lot of back and forth negotiation as well. That takes up a lot of time. There's your actual contracts for commissions, filling out that paperwork, turning in W-9s to get paid for that. Every commission contract has a different payment schedule. So say this commission is going to be paid in 3 installments. Well, then it falls on me to make sure you're getting paid properly for this commission. So there's just all of this revenue floating out there. And it can be extremely overwhelming depending on how in demand you are. It can be really overwhelming to keep up with it all. So there's a lot of different different streams of revenue coming in. And
well, it's not just revenue you're helping with; it's also management, right?
Yeah,
like emails, catalogs.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the main services I provide, I would say. And I'm not sure composers necessarily really think of that when they approach me about it. But in my former life, kind of doing arts administration, especially PR, if you don't respond to your email within 60 minutes, then your story on your arts group could be taken over by another arts group because the reporter doesn't have time to wait for your comment. So you could just be passed up and they could move on to somebody else. So PR actually really taught me that, of quick response over email, especially in kind of the climate that we live in where everything is like instantly gratifying. Everybody is so used to being connected all the time. That's a big service, and it really, it's really helpful. I like to think that more of my clients' music is being performed because the process has been easy and somebody has replied immediately. I hope that's the case. I think there's also just a customer service kind of branding slant to it. You want to give people the impression that you are legitimate and professional, and you have somebody who is there to answer questions. I think that helps you as a composer as well.
Right. Anything else that you do or could do?
I also provide a little bit of marketing and PR kind of help. So I can write e-newsletter content. I can help you with social media messaging if you need that. I've helped with website content management. Jonathan Newman is about to launch a new website, and I've kind of project managed that. So little things like that that bring you more business. I think, Jonathan had a good point on his podcast.
The interview with me?
Yeah, several weeks ago about, step one is having a really good website that functions.
Yes.
And so I'm certainly happy to help with things like that, especially something as important as a website, where a well-designed website with lots of content and good information makes my job at the end of the day much easier. So I am all about helping somebody make their website more functional, rather than me kind of having to track down more information to fulfill your order when it could be taken care of on the website. So things like that, helping keep up with performance calendars, that's always super helpful, especially when you need to cross-reference with your ASCAP submissions, making sure that you kind of captured all of those performances and turned them in for credit. My previous life was marketing and PR. That's all I did all day. So anything that you can think up as far as helping with your sales, I'm happy to do it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Isn't that so important too? Because even though we're in the business of making art, we have to turn around and then sell the service of the making art and then the finished product.
Yeah.
Sales is really important.
It is. And it's, I guess something that we haven't really touched on either was resale and retailers, music retailers.
Mm-hmm.
Every composer kind of has a different relationship with retailers. Some composers do a lot of their business is through retailers. And, having good relationships with those retailers and having a very good system in place for accounts payable, and they're getting invoiced correctly and getting shipments correct. All of that is very important as well, because you as a business owner want to make sure that business to business relationships are good and successful as well.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a key component. How can composers find an assistant? Well, I guess we can start with, is Goddess of Wind looking for more clients right now?
At the moment, I'm on pause. I'm actually relocating to a different city in a couple of months. So anytime that I am thinking about taking on new clients, I really focus on making sure that my current client list is well taken care of. I think at this point, my greatest fear is growing too fast. Mm-hmm. Because it's really important to me for my clients to feel like I'm always there for them. Otherwise, kind of what's the point of my business? If I took on too much work at once, I think it would just totally defeat the purpose of Goddess of Wind. Because ultimately, I want Steve to feel like he has a business manager, and I want Jonathan to feel like he has a business manager. I don't want them to feel, even though I refer to them as clients, I don't want them to feel like they're just another client. Like that is not appealing to me whatsoever.
Right.
So at the time, I am not taking on anyone new. That could change. I'm trying to figure out a way to responsibly grow. And part of that will probably mean my daughter going into daycare, which is fine. She is totally ready, and I'm ready for her to go to daycare. It's been a wild year taking care of her. It's at this point, everything's a little bit on hold until I get resettled in a new place.
So where can composers go to find an assistant? How do they filter through? I just saw a friend on Facebook who's a major video game composer and does movie stuff, Hollywood. Christopher Tin, he's been on the podcast, just put a post on Facebook that he's hiring an assistant. And he's got a whole job application website and everything set up, and he's going to filter through these. But I think it doesn't have to look like that.
It doesn't have to look like that, but that's actually kind of brilliant. I think I'm a shining example of your assistant doesn't have to live in the same place you live. Mm-hmm. All of my clients live many hundreds of miles away from me, and my entire business is online. I talk to them on the phone maybe every few weeks or so, but otherwise we kind of do our own thing. We check in. I'm always on email, so they check in on email and we're all good. So, keep that in mind when you're looking for somebody, is they don't necessarily, although you probably want some kind of relationship with them, they don't necessarily have to live where you live. The other thing that I could throw out there, because I talk about this with my husband a lot. My husband is a music education professor, so he sees a lot of undergrads who love band, love orchestra, love choir. They're always looking for some extra money on the side. And this kind of job is flexible enough where they could be returning emails at 2 a.m. if that's, what works for them. So I would almost say if you live in a city with a major university, you might reach out to some of the professors there and see if they might know any undergrads who are looking to stay involved with the band scene, or
whatever scene.
And need some extra money and are willing to answer an email or two. Mm-hmm. That's a possibility. You can also go, to one of many websites. My lifestyle is becoming a much, much more hip thing to do, I guess, because people want to set their own hours. Yeah. So there's, hundreds of websites out there that are, matching people up depending on what your needs are.
I've hired several people to do work for me through Upwork.
Yep.
And even Fiverr for really small projects.
Yep. All of that. And, you could start really small. Like you could start with one project. Like here, I've collected all of my programs for ASCAP, but I just don't have the time to go through the online form and submit them all. You could find somebody on a website like that, give them that project and see how it goes. And all of that is, really easy to collaborate on through Dropbox or whatever, system you use. But they could do something like that for you. And if it's a really good experience, then you could say, hey, do you feel like doing more of this? If I sent you a random vendor profile that I need filled out for this school district, can you take care of that for me? The one caveat I would say is one of the highlights, I guess, of what I've been able to do with my guys is that I already know them very well. And they're totally comfortable with me knowing their social security number.
Yeah, passwords to websites.
Driver's license numbers.
Yeah.
I am constantly shocked at how much information school districts ask for to create vendor profiles on people. So yeah, I do have access to a lot of their personal information, and I'm very cognizant of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you kind of framed it the way you did, that you don't have to enter a long-term relationship with an assistant. You can start with a one-off project. And that's what I've typically suggested to composers is choose a task that's clearly defined and outsource it.
Yep. And I met a composer a couple of years ago who, and we talked about her before. She loves doing all of the business part of her work and is still able to compose and get everything done. But there's, one task that she absolutely hates doing. She puts it off until the very last minute because she doesn't want to do it. And so she asked, well, hey, do you want to do it? And I said, well, at this point, I was very pregnant at the time. And I said, at this point, I don't want to take on any new work because I'm not really sure how much I can handle with a baby being in the house. And so at the time, I couldn't help her out. But if there is one job that you're just like, I just can't bring myself to do it, I hate life when I think about having to do that project, then maybe you should hire somebody to do it. I mean, it's probably worth the money just to take it off your plate.
Yeah, that's typically what I think too. So Sarah, I'm interested in your thoughts here. This is a question I ask just about everyone who's on the podcast. But what are 3 business tips that you could give to composers that would move their business forward, things they could implement today?
First, have a functioning website. And by that, I mean you should have a very up-to-date catalog of works. You should ideally, with that catalog, have a perusal score and a recording. And most importantly of all, contact information, some way to get that piece of music. If you're at a point where your website is not allowing people to get to your music, then you're doing something wrong. If you're allowing your website to lapse by a year or two and your most current works aren't on it, then you're doing something wrong. So I would say website is super important. I would also say you don't have to be super responsive, responding to an email within an hour of it being sent. I think that's ridiculous to ask for, but you should really shoot for getting back to someone within 2 to 3 days. I know for some composers that can be really tricky because, my clients go underground 2 weeks at a time, and it'll be, 10 days before I hear from one of them and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I was finishing XX piece. Mm-hmm. So I know that's a challenge for creative people, especially when you're in the zone and you're under deadline and trying to get this piece out the door. But it is really important to respond in a timely fashion. I love band directors. I am married to a band director, but conductors and band directors are not necessarily the best planners. So it's very possible that if you're not responding in a timely fashion, they're just going to move on to somebody else's music that they can get faster. You don't want that to happen. No. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot just because you didn't respond to an email. So I would say
I actually had to interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
In an interview with Jason Heath on the podcast, mm-hmm. he was conducting a high school orchestra, and he was going to take them to Midwest. Yep. And he had that experience. A composer didn't get back to him in time, so he had to move on. So this individual lost the opportunity.
And that pains me. Mm-hmm. That pains me. So I think those 2 really are probably the biggest ones. Is make sure your website works. Make sure that you're a live person on the other end of the email. Because really, one thing that I've noticed a lot in 10 years of working in the arts is that people are just very focused on access. And if they can't access the artists, then it's not really worth it for them. So I talked about this a lot in my former life when I was doing marketing for the ballet. Young people weren't really interested in coming to ballet performances unless they could meet the dancers after the performance. Mm-hmm. That's you wouldn't think that this is true, but people really do want to hear directly from artists and hear about process. I totally get it because I wish I were, but I'm not artistically inclined. I deeply loved being in band and I loved playing instruments, but I was not very good. I was not blessed in that way. but I loved being around the conductors and I loved being around composers. And so here I am. But people just want to hear from artists. And so if you're inaccessible and not, answering your email, then that's, that can kind of hurt your brand, I think.
Mm-hmm. I like most of Anne Rice's novels, and I follow her on Facebook, and her assistant actually does most of her social media marketing and whatever. And every once in a while, he'll just say, "This is Beckett. I'm answering for Anne." So even doing small things like that, just so you can stay on top of it. Yeah,
absolutely. What I used to do all the time at really both of my day jobs, I handled some of the social media, and a lot of times it was as easy as saying "overheard" in the ballet dancers' break room. Oh, this one thing is giving me a really tough time, and or I have discovered this new point shoe that I really enjoy. Putting those kinds of things up on social media, you would not think people would just love that, but they do, because it makes them feel like they're in the room. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say maybe if there were a third thing, you asked me for 3 things that composers should be doing. Maybe the third is keeping up your social media. Because it is about that access of, what are you working on? And it might seem like selfish self-promotion, but you can't look at it that way. I think it's more you're reaching out to the people who are already invested in you and want to know what you're working on. One person who does this, well, 2 people, I will say, who do this so sensationally is Eric Whitaker and John Mackey. Mm-hmm. They are phenomenal on their social media, and you really do feel like you're in the room while they're writing a piece of music. John posts hilarious things about, this is my current view today, and it's his cat sitting on his piano. Things like that. People love that. And that is part of your brand. And that's what makes people want to root for you and follow you. Eric does that just amazingly well on Instagram. He's a wonderful Instagrammer. He posts a picture every day of where he's at. And he really is Carmen Sandiego. I mean, every day the
he's
man
all over.
He is in a different country, like every day. And so he's had quite a following now on Instagram, because every day he's in a new place posting a picture. And he's super artistic, which is amazing to see too. Not only is he blessed aurally, but also visually. He has such a great visual sensibility. And so those types of things are awesome for keeping up that relationship. Even if you can't respond to every single email you get, at least people feel connected to you through social media. Right. So that's a good pointer too. That's worth the time. It is worth the investment that you make.
Yeah, it's good. Is there anything else that you wanted to say, but I didn't ask or we didn't cover?
No, not really. I think just on a personal note, I would just say composers are amazing people. The work that you're putting out into the world is so personal, and obviously involves not just a lot of work, but a lot of your emotion, a lot of sacrifice to get to where you are. So just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, art is what makes life worth living. So I think that you will find there are a lot of people like me who want to help keep that art in the world and cheer for you.
Sarah, if I had heard this 15 years ago, I would have changed how I had handled my whole career. And that's exactly what I want to do for people, not just like talking to recent grads, but if one person can listen to this and get some advice and wisdom and take their career to the next step, then I feel like I've succeeded. And I think you absolutely have provided that value.
That's great. I mean, the whole idea of when is the best time to hire an assistant, it just varies so much from person to person. And it's really, like you said, I don't think there's any one way to do it. I've had a couple of conversations recently with some possible clients that are on the fence, and then I quote them some fees and they say, oh, that's a little bit high. I don't think I can do that quite yet. And I say, and that's fine. It's fine that you can't do that right now. But the fact that you're thinking about it, the fact that possibly 2 to 3 years down the road, I could be in a better place to help. We're all kind of growing it together. We're all kind of figuring it out together. So that's been really exciting to me, is that it's just a great community of people. I mean, I love working with artists, and while they're trying to figure out their business, I'm trying to figure out my business too. So it's actually working out quite beautifully, very organically.
Right. Thank you so much, Sarah. I feel like I've caught the unicorn.
Oh, for a brief moment. Now I have to go chase after my 1-year-old. So.
Well, before you do that, let's take a quick break, and then I want to ask you the lightning round questions.
Yes, let's do it.
I'm very excited to announce that the Portfolio Composer has become a strategic partner with the American Composers Forum. What this means is that we are working together to build our composition community. If you have not heard of the American Composers Forum, you can find more at composersforum.org, but it is the largest composer-oriented organization in the United States that has many resources, programs, and grant opportunities designed to help you build your career and to create your art. The biggest benefit I have gotten out of being an ACF member is the curated composer opportunity list. This might be the most extensive list that you can find anywhere, with opportunities for calls for scores, grants, and performance opportunities. So I highly recommend joining this organization. Again, you can learn more at composersforum.org. And I also want to invite you to join the Portfolio Composer community by becoming a Patreon sponsor. By joining the community, you will have access to private webinars that I do for the Patreon communities and students of my course, and as well as private coachings, one-on-one sessions, and a few other bonuses. So please go to patreon.com/Portfolio Composer.
Welcome to the lightning round.
Well, you ready for these?
Yes, I think so.
You're going to be, it's funny. Some composers get so nervous. Yeah. That's why I created this. Like, when they fill out the form, it takes them here because it just calms them down, and they know okay, what can I do? And I've had people literally write out their answers.
Yeah.
But at least for the lightning round, I think it's better if people shoot from the hip.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. All right, Sarah, if you could turn back the clock, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
I guess I would say hard work is everything. Opportunities will come and go, but your work ethic is probably the most important thing you have. When I started this business, it was a huge jump into a very scary place. I'm a very scheduled person, very, very type A. And so jumping into kind of the unknown and not quite sure of knowing whether this was going to be successful was very scary for me. But I think if you approach anything that you do with a good work ethic and you're willing to put in the time, that you're going to land on your feet wherever you're at.
This is probably then is related to the answer you're going to give next, but what is a personal habit of yours that you feel leads to your success?
I actually was thinking about this morning, and it sounds ridiculous, but I really swear by it. I think as I get older, I swear by it even more. I try to do something within the first hour of being awake that I find is, what's the word I'm looking for? I try to check something off my checklist for the day within the first hour that I wake up. So for me, it's kind of like, as our amazing president recently said, priming the pump. I feel like priming the pump with one item off my checklist within the first hour I'm awake is a great way to stay kind of in the zone and stay efficient. The only way that I can function handling so much email from so many different places is to be extremely efficient. So when I wake up, I try to do, whether that's make the bed or unload the dishwasher, do something that puts me in a frame of mind of getting things done. I think is super important.
Tim Ferriss, I'm sure you are familiar with who Tim Ferriss is.
My husband is obsessed.
Yes, I have a kind of a man crush on that guy, but he says that something that helps him when it gets started is just to make the bed.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sense of, hey, I did this. I can do something else. I can move forward.
I never recognized this about myself until I got married and someone was living in my house every day and saw me doing it and called it to my attention. But I require a lot of sleep because when I wake up, I am at 100%. From the minute I wake up, I am out of bed, moving on to the next thing. And I kind of function like that until about 8 o'clock at night. And I take my shower and relax. But for me, it's really important to stay efficient and stay on top of your game is to start the day with that one thing that you kind of puts you in that frame of mind.
Yeah, it's great. So you said that you enjoyed being in band. Well, what was the instrument you played growing up?
I was a percussionist.
So what instrument have you always wanted to learn to play and why?
One thing that I kind of got into towards the end of my band career were hand drums.
Yeah, like
congas, bongos.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could go back and learn more about that, I found that fascinating. And really, I guess, love the physicality about it. And just the variety of sounds that you can get out of it. I think percussion's amazing. I loved being a percussionist, but yeah, hand drums were really fun.
2 comments. First, get yourself a djembe, go down to the city park and join the drum circle. Secondly, I was at the New Music Gathering last week, and one of the featured performers, so it was an hour-long performance, was Stephen Schick, who was on Bang on a Can was the ensemble.
Yeah.
And it was a solo percussion concert, and I got to tell you, it was phenomenal.
There's something about it that resonates with everyone. Like if you could pick one percussion instrument, something about like those sounds is very natural to humans. It's very strange.
Well, it might have been one of the earliest form of music making, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think it just goes way back.
Yep. So this next question often can be a challenge for people, but it comes from the pure and unadulterated love of music.
Okay.
So what is a composition? It doesn't have to be concert music. It can be pop music, rock, whatever, that caused you to stop in your tracks, that have those life-altering moments where you have to pull over on the side of the road and just finish listening to the song before you can keep driving.
For me, every time, that is Mahler's Second Symphony. I weep every time that I hear the last 3 minutes of that piece of music. It's just phenomenal. I mean, it's so huge in scale. One DVD that I own is Alan Gilbert and New York Phil doing that. I think it was the 5th anniversary of commemorating 9/11 that they performed it, and they streamed it outside of Lincoln Center. I watched that DVD often. And every time, like you said, I could have it, playing in the house while I'm cleaning the house or cooking a meal or whatever. But that last 3 minutes of that symphony, I have to stop everything I'm doing and listen to it and just cry. And I'm not a huge crier, but gosh, that is just, it's life altering to me every single time. And I have listened to it probably at this point 1,000 times. And it is like it's new every time. There's something about it. I can't put my finger on it, but that's my piece.
That's great. You almost look like you're getting teary-eyed just thinking about it.
Because, and I think that part of it too is what you bring to it, right? Like, I fell in love with that piece in college, and I have come back to it at every major life change, and it's kind of been with me this whole time. And so not only are you, really connecting to the piece of music itself, but you're also connecting to all of the moments before that you listened to it and needed it, right? Like it becomes a fabric of your memory, really.
What about a book? Is there a book you could recommend for our audience?
Oh my gosh. So I have a 1-year-old. I have not read a book in a long time. I am an avid reader. I love to read, and that has fallen by the wayside. So no, I do not have a book that I can recommend.
Well, I'm gonna hold you down on this one. What would be a desert island book? This doesn't have to be a business book. It could be fiction.
Okay, so if I had to pick a book that went onto the desert island with me, it would either be Grapes of Wrath or East of Eden. John Steinbeck, to me, is incredible. And his style is so simple and so powerful. I look at the words that he writes and I think, if I wrote that, no one would bat an eye. But you write it and it's like gospel. So to me, it's Steinbeck. Any Steinbeck, really.
I got to the end of Grapes of Wrath and I was virtually in tears.
Oh, yeah.
And then reading East of Eden, I rarely laugh out loud while I'm reading a book. But the scene where, ostensibly his mom takes that airplane ride for the promotion, I was laughing so hard. Like, it was just so well written.
Yeah, he's amazing. And you get the sense when you read his work that you're like reading the Bible, right? Like,
yeah, it's important.
It's just
it matters.
Everything he says, it just is.
Right. Okay, so where can people find you on the internet? And if they have more questions about hiring an assistant or they want to talk to you personally, how can they get in contact with you?
So my website is goddessofwin.com. And you can always email Sarah at goddessofwin.com. I'm happy to help in any way I can. Even if that means, we can't necessarily work together right now, and you just need some guidance, I'm cool with that. I like I said, I love composers. I love artists. It's been my life work so far. So anything I can do to kind of point you in the right direction, I'm more than happy to do it.
Excellent. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for allowing me to kind of pick your brain and paint a better picture of how and why we as composers can hire assistants. Oh, yeah. Yep. I encourage you to do what works best for you. And like I said, if you get to a point where the business part is interfering with what you're writing, then you might want to consider it. Excellent. Well, have a great rest of your day, and we will definitely be in touch. Thanks so much.